Hey everybody, welcome to So with Joe. Today we're picking up where we left off last time, working on the blanket project. And yeah, tying in a couple of panels together to make it a little bigger so that it will actually be useful. Tried using it the other day to keep myself warm, and it was a very small shawl, so we're nowhere near done yet. So yeah, let's get into it. Our good world news for today is a number of things that are done right now on a local scale, but I feel could be introduced to the global scale and could be a big benefit. The first one, and whatever you may feel about the military aside, please, it exists and people are out there fighting, and that's a fact of life. Now, to help them improve on that life, what the U.S. Marines and infantry are doing is they are starting to use suppressors, silencers, on their combat rifles. And if you know anyone who has served in the military, they probably have some sort of hearing loss from their time in the military, because there's a lot of weapons firing, grenades, mortars, rockets, even driving in vehicles with the windows down, patrolling, or having your head stuck up out of a turret, being the gopher out of the hole on a turret truck. And it takes a toll on your hearing, all those things. So in order to help reduce one of those things, at least, they are getting suppressors for their assault rifles. And that's great, because the ones who make it home, their quality of life could greatly be improved by the use of silencers. The other thing, and is what it is, right? It will help improve the communication on the battlefield. So if you don't have the constant pop, 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 the big pop of the assault rifles going off around you all the time, you'll actually be able to yell and hear and not miscommunicate. So you always see in war movies, guys, the guy on the radio surrounded by guys that are firing, and it's like, what? Say again. And this way it would make communications a lot more effective, and it would save lives, I think. And that's something that could be adopted by sorry, pardon. Could be adopted by military and police around the world. Because one of the come here, cheers. Totally lost that. train of thought, sorry. War, you know, is what it is what it is. It's a terrible thing. Going to change my angle a little bit here. Forgive me shifting your world here. So I'll get everything centered a little bit better for you, and I seem to sit more naturally like this when I'm doing this. So we will make some changes, some add adjustments. One thing that they're doing in the United States to improve habitat, the habitat that's being defended by the Marines and infantry with their suppressors now. What they're doing in desert areas is they are bringing in beavers, which have been relocated from other areas, nuisance beavers that come into areas that are inhabited and start doing damage. Normally the process was to have them euthanized. A friendlier word of saying killed. So they'd just kill all these nuisance beavers that would come into wherever in their state that they didn't want them. But now they are saving these beavers. In the last 3 years they've relocated 50 of them. And they are relocating them to desert areas where the dams will actually provide natural water level restoration and slowing of the water flow. Because a lot of times if water is left unchecked to flow through areas, it'll wash away river systems, take a lot of the sediment, the farmland, the riverbeds away from there. And yeah, so the technique that they're doing with beaver relocation is called passive river restoration. So basically they bring these beavers in, free them in an area where they know they can survive, and they dam up the river, and the river levels rise, and the sediment that is flowing through the river stops and drops and stays. Stops, drops and rolls. Is it on fire? No, it's not on fire. So you don't get all that farmland washed away. It settles more in the rivers, and that the nutrients from the sediment can still be used rather than just being washed away. Also just keeps the riverbeds from drying out as easily, so that you don't have the drought. You don't have the heavy rain. Everything gets washed away, and then it's just drought. You have beaver dams keeping the water in and slowing everything down. And I think That's one of my favorite types of stories to hear, is when someone's problem is someone else's solution. Because why just kill things when you can put them where they should be? Cheers. And the other thing that I think is really awesome about this program is that it is restoring animals to the area which had previously been trapped out by settlers. So it's a case of, I think, people realizing the error of their ways and trying to make things right. That's another one of the stories that I really like. It's like, man, we, you know, well, I guess not we. It was our ancestors. They didn't know any better. You know, and I have a hard time holding guilt for the current state of the world, because it wasn't us. It was our ancestors. And they didn't know. And now that we know, we're doing something about it. So this is where I hate all the guilt. Sorry to use the word hate. I don't like using that, but the guilt associated with the current state of the world, I think, is very unfounded. Because yes, this is the stuff that's been done, but now what can we do and what are we going to do? You know, like, you don't have to accept that things are going to continue the way they are, but you have to accept that they are the way they are. So stop feeling guilty about it and just start doing stuff about it. Even though they do say guilt leads to action, so, you know, maybe do feel guilty about it and do something positive about it. But if you're crippled by guilt from stuff like that, like, unless you had a direct hand in whatever happened that you feel bad about, don't feel bad about it. All you can do is help what's happening now. I think there's a big story right now, all the residential schools, they're finding thousands of bodies of children, native children, that were, well, I don't know if just died or were killed at residential schools and just buried out back, kind of thing. And it's horrible. It is an absolutely horrible story. It's a tragedy. I wish that it had never happened. I do not feel one tiny bit of guilt about it, because I had absolutely nothing to do with it. My ancestors were not involved with that church, with that edge of things. We tried to help. If there were native children already in the system, we would try to adopt them and care for them as best we could. And we were just doing what we knew. And yeah, we had nothing to do with the church, so I can't feel bad about that story at all. I can't hold guilt for that, because that was not anything to do with me or my ancestors. And even if it was my ancestors, I don't see how I could feel guilty about it because I didn't do it. You know, it wasn't my actions. You know, if my dad was Hitler, you know, we'll bring this talk to a conclusion by bringing up Hitler. If my dad was Hitler, I wouldn't feel bad. It wasn't me, it was him. You know, if I was not, you know, following in my daddy Hitler's footsteps, then why would I feel bad about it? Makes no sense. You know, you can try to make things right if you want. You know, like, oh yeah, this was a terrible thing, and, you know, this is the benefits that Daddy Adolf got from all of this, so here, give this back and do what you can with it. But I wouldn't feel personally bad about it. And I know that's a very extreme example, and I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't have gone down that route. But there it is. So let's get off of Daddy Adolf there and get onto some Habitat for Humanity story, which is really neat. Also has worldwide implications, potentially, and I just, the one thing I just didn't know at all is that they were working on 3D printing housing. So basically what it is if you've ever seen a 3D printer, it's basically that attached to a concrete truck. And then the size is like big enough to make a house. I'm not describing this well. So it's basically a mega 3D printer that runs on concrete instead of plastic or the metal ones. They actually have welding 3D printers as well now. So they set up this machine and it prints out the framework of the house, the floor plan and the walls and etc., etc., and then everything else is built out from inside. So with the price of lumber being very high, it saves right now about 15% per square foot on costs, so that's very significant. The other huge advantage was with the 3D printer making the framework. It hammered that all out in about 12 hours instead of timber framing, which would take about 4 weeks. So you're saving crew, labor, all that stuff of weeks and weeks and weeks of labor. And that could be a huge solution to housing shortages. So if you could just go down the street with a 3D printer machine, go, you know, lot to lot to lot, print out even just a basic outside shelter, that would save so many people's lives already in developing countries or areas where they've been devastated by natural disasters. You just go in and start 3D printing shelters so that at least people can be inside something and then build off of that and make it theirs again. That's mega technology. That's crazy in my mind that that's happening. Yeah, that's just really cool. And then with them being associated with Habitat for Humanity, these houses are going to deserving people. Basically, they have to put in 300 hours of sweat equity, and I can't remember the criteria. There are a couple things, but they have to be basically like involved in the community. and then Habitat comes along, and if they're building houses for 15% less than they could, that'd be a savings for these people who, and you know, Habitat doesn't just give these houses away. They give houses with low, with no interest mortgages, and then there's a payment plan for them. So this isn't free, so any cost savings is good. And especially for people who are in the Habitat for Humanity program, you know, they need to save as much as they can. Okay, it's looking pretty good. Still got to finish up this corner. Yeah, we'll fiddle around in this corner yet. I have one more story that I didn't write down, but I think I have the gist of in my head, and I think it's really cool. All right, cheers. Now, in the United States, when they have an oil drilling project, and when that oil drilling project comes to an end, the oil companies don't have a responsibility to clean up the area. They must have worked it into their contract somehow that once they're done, they just walk away. And that means that all these oil mining operations are leaving open wells to the tune of over 1 million of these open wells. And what these open wells do is they constantly emit methane, or methane, depending on where you're from. So this methane gas contributes to local heating, like basically global warming on a local scale, and causes damage to the environment by raising the temperature. And it's a horrible way to leave things behind for the environment, because you're damaging the environment with these oil wells that are left wide open to breathe. So there is a man, sometimes there's a man, that's a Big Lebowski reference. Sorry, I feel the need to explain myself when what I say doesn't really fit with what I'm doing. Sometimes there's a man. Well, he's the man for his time and place. I think this guy might be one of those guys. He is an oil executive, or a former oil executive, who saw the state that the companies would leave these wells in, and he was disgusted by it, and so he started up a non-profit company that goes around closing all of these oil wells, or capping them. Sorry, capping them is what they call it. So this is a kind of a heartwarming, you know, make good, you know, guy makes his fortune off of an industry, identifies a problem and then goes back and fixes it. That's that kind of story I really like too. It's heartwarming. It's you know, speaking of being motivated by guilt to action, yeah, he's making good though. That's the important thing. If he can go back and help clean up after what these companies have done, good for him. And he's going in and hiring people who have been left jobless by the industry when it left their area. So all the people that did all this stuff to their local area, they're going in and making good on what they've done as well, and probably feels pretty good for them too. 'Cause they probably didn't realize when they started everything that they would just walk away from it. You'd figure, you know, there would be some sort of cleanup crew that would go and cap stuff off. 'Cause I remember back in the early 90s with Desert Storm, there were tons of oil wells that were ignited and were on fire and burning for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the processes that they had to do to go back in and cap those off was just horrendous. It's basically guys walking in these like huge suits, walking towards this inferno, walking into hell, and have to cap these things off so that the oil would stop flowing out of the ground and burning off into the atmosphere. That is an environmental disaster right there. That's like Exxon Valdez disaster levels. Like, it's these huge catastrophes that we have to prevent. You know, make sure those don't happen. And then focus on the other little things that we can fine tune from there. Because we have been screwing this planet into oblivion for a long time. I'm going to have to figure out how to do electric conversions on my vehicles now that lithium is recyclable. I think that's probably the way everything's going to go now. Well, it is, because yeah, Ford is not going to be building any gasoline powered vehicles in a few years, which is mind-blowing. I'm just interested to see all the conversion kits that are going to come out. Looky here. Still have one pin. One pin in. Let's pull the pin. And yeah, could be a little neater in that corner. I'm not too concerned about it, as long as it holds together. And, well, hopefully it will. And if not, then we restitch. But we're gonna have t-shirts sewn in on the other side, so that'll help hold everything together too, and it's not, you know, I'm not going to be hanging a 200-pound gorilla off of it or anything, I hope. So, should be okay. It's getting big. Start working more on this end, catch up. That's awesome. I'm pumped on this. I've never made a blanket before, and just out of scraps. You know, I have a lot of patch material, like a lot of patch material. So it's nice to use up all, you know, bigger pieces of it at a time. It's encouraging. Alright. Alright. Cheers. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I really do appreciate the time we get to spend together. Oh yeah. Until next time, keep chillin'. Don't forget your cookie. Peace.